This year marks the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the most important documents of the 20th century, and perhaps one of the most important human rights documents in human history. But 75 years later, we are wrestling with some of the same questions. What does it mean for human rights to be universal? How do we understand human rights when they're in tension? How do we best affirm and protect human rights? These are some of the questions that perhaps don't get a lot of attention in the hustle, bustle of our daily lives, and yet they are some of the most important questions that we need to wrestle with in each generation. With this symposium, we have brought together scholars and legal experts, jurists and practitioners from across Canada and around the world to carefully examine the challenges and opportunities of defending human rights.
Well, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is really the centerpiece of modern international human rights law. So it's very key to understanding everything that flows from it, really. It's the starting point in many respects. It was adopted in 1948 by the United Nations General Assembly. It's quite a remarkable document because it sounds as relevant as if it was adopted yesterday. The language was well chosen. We have many documents that show their age, but the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not one of them. It resonates still today.
We're celebrating it because it was the fundamental document that would be used to inspire the different countries to look more seriously at violations of fundamental rights, to educate people about their rights, and then to find a way to implement those rights.
The way we treat the vulnerable, the weak, the defenseless is a reflection of who we are as a people. So why should we care about the UDHR? Well, first and foremost, the UDHR is today a very important human rights instrument. It is customary international law. What that means is that state practice, the community of states all over the world have accepted that the UDHR commitments reflects common standards around human rights. And so to that extent, the UDHR is the most important document that reflects humanity's collective aspiration around how to be a responsible member of the human family.
I think the topic has wider significance to the public because religion affects millions of people's lives, and the definition of religion and how the courts define religion affects people in their daily lives.
It's an instrument that speaks to the world, that speaks to every human being and every people around the world about how to respect the inherent dignity of the human person and everything important about human beings in the rights context. And there are aspects of it that we still need to be thinking about and developing out and reflecting back on what those were getting at.
It was a seminal moment that really started the process of the growth of human rights. Since then we have had several covenants. Covenant on civil rights, covenant on economic, cultural and social rights. We have international conventions on the rights of persons with disabilities, the rights of children, the rights of indigenous people, so a growing body of international conventions.
It is important to recognize that human rights are universal because truth exists and truth cuts across time and space and diverse cultures because the human person responds to the same truth everywhere and in every context. Universal human rights are inherent and inalienable. These are the words that were used in the preamble. The inherence of rights suggests that they are part and parcel of our very humanity. In a sense, they are hardwired into our human existence, into our humanness.
I think that it also speaks something about who we believe human persons are and what it is about a human person that requires respect of other people as well as respect of state institutions. I think that the Universal Declaration, because it's based on an idea of human dignity, which is grounded in a certain vision of the human person, I think it's important for us to remember that that's what's being protected as human persons. It's not just an idea of certain kinds of rights that we ideologically either align or disalign ourselves with, but really we're just trying to protect people as human persons.
The 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a great opportunity to reflect on the influence that the Declaration has had on international human rights law and on Canadian human rights law, and also an opportunity to think about the ways in which in Canada we have fallen short of achieving its ideals. So an opportunity for both celebration and concern about how we might do better. When we think about the impact the Declaration has had, it has spawned many human rights treaties to which Canada is signatory. It has also transformed Canadian law so that we give stronger protection to human rights. And this goes back almost to the beginning. 70 years ago, we started passing legislation aimed at giving effect to the norms embodied in the UDHR in Canadian law. When the first Ontario Human Rights Code was adopted, it expressly referenced the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in its own preamble and described the UDHR as being part of fundamental public policy in Ontario. We, of course, are familiar with the Canadian Bill of Rights passed in 1960, the Charter of Rights passed in 1982. All of these developments were influenced and encouraged by the UN Declaration on Human Rights in 1948. But there are also reasons to be concerned. We've fallen short in important ways of providing strong protection to all of the rights set out in the UDHR. So, for example, the Charter is focused primarily on civil and political rights and doesn't give strong protection to social, economic, and cultural rights that are also expressed in the UDHR.
I think particularly about the context of Indigenous rights. I think about the context of health rights that have not necessarily been fully respected in the Canadian context. So as Canadians, the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights is also an occasion for retrospection, to think about how we can improve.
The courts have recognized what they call a presumption of conformity, that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms should be interpreted in a manner that aligns it with our international human rights obligations, including the UDHR and treaties that have been adopted in its wake. But our courts do not give consistent effect to the presumption of conformity. Our practice is somewhat intermittent, and I think we can do a lot better in ensuring that the UDHR guides the interpretation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and other Canadian human rights documents going forward.
I think one of the benefits of having groups of academics, scholars, judges, lawyers come together to discuss this declaration is that you're getting really a variety of perspectives. There's just a lot of different human rights that are subsumed under it, and so you really need a variety of perspectives to get a good sense of what the Declaration really is in full. And I think having very intelligent, penetrating conversations about that really helps inform our thinking.
It's a great conference here today because it's paying tribute to a transformative movement and moment in international development and law and so forth. And for me, it's been a bit transformative too, because throughout my career, I hadn't really paid that much attention to international human rights law, despite knowing that it was important. And it's when I started to work on freedom of peaceful assembly that I came to realize just how rich a resource the international instruments and their commentaries and their authoritative interpretations, just what a rich resource they are for us in Canada under the Charter. And so, as I said at the conference, I'm really hoping that I can bring that material into the spotlight in my work on freedom of peaceful assembly, because we really need the help. This is a guarantee that hasn't had much development under the Charter, and my fear is that if we don't get at it now, 40 years after the Charter was enacted, we might never get around to it.
So to take time to actually remember what the Universal Declaration says, to reflect on what its drafters had in mind when they were putting it together and the different kinds of things that they were facing and the decisions they had to make when they were drafting the instrument, I think is really important because it provides an idea about the foundations that also inform our own constitutional text. And it gives us a better idea of what it is that we're trying to achieve, which, I mean, in so many different ways, intellectually, morally, it's important for us to understand those foundations for our protections.
So I think what people can take away is that we have an instrument that got support from representatives from around the world, from a lot of different cultural traditions from different countries, and they could come together around concepts like inherent human dignity and concepts of respecting human rights. And that's something that we all need to live out in all the things that we do. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is actually a very accessible document that I encourage viewers at home to go and read and to reflect upon all the different aspects of what we could come around together in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as this instrument that brought together representatives from around the world.
You can read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a short document. It's less than 2,000 words. And I've even tried to get my students in the past to learn it by heart. I've never been able to do it. But there are parts of it I know by heart. It's a very nice, concise introduction to the basic principles of human rights. 30 short articles of 1 or 2 sentences. It's a capsule version of what has grown into an enormous system, very complex, with all kinds of elaborate mechanisms and everything that require a lot of expertise to grasp. But you don't need to be an expert to grasp what's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and really everybody should know what's in there because they're your rights. It's not just an intellectual interest, they're all rights that are important to us in our daily lives.
Practically, what's the biggest takeaway of this symposium will be the collection of papers that's going to be published by LexisNexis in the coming year, and will bring together and really flesh out a lot of the discussions we've had today. But I'd say probably it's helpful to just pause at this moment and think 1948 was not really that long ago. You probably know someone born in and around that era. I know my mother was born in 1947, and to think of just one person's lifetime, how far we've come, and yet that was only one person's lifetime ago. That, you know, think of a person born today. What will human rights look like 75 years from then? We struggle to imagine because we cast our minds back to what society would have been like at that time, and these were very lofty, idealistic sentiments that weren't really playing out in the world around them. It's tough for us to imagine, to be creative enough to think, where is this going? What will the next 75 years bring? But exciting to think of how much the law can change in just such a short span of time.
With this video, with this project, we hope that you've learned a little bit more about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the universal rights that you possess. That you possess because of who you are, a member of the human family, a person born equal in dignity and rights, a person who has been endowed with reason and conscience.